Welcome to the latest episode of First Word in Sport. Today I am joined by James and John. The intention is for a bit of a World Cup special. How are you both doing, gents?
Yeah, good, Luke. All good. Yeah, lovely weekend here, but yeah, not too bad. Looking forward to the World Cup starting on Thursday.
Yeah, morning, fellas. Yeah, it's kind of nice to have a weekend with no football, to be honest, because it takes up such a big chunk of your weekend most weeks. So, got a few things off my to-do list and got myself fully into World Cup mode now, I think.
Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to just touch on a couple of items from the general footballing world before we go into the World Cup stuff. There's been a few interesting news stories this week. One was Sullivan at West Ham. He's obviously stepped down for allegations of all sorts of allegations, which we're not going to go into. But I know it's been coming because there's been all sorts of injunctions in place, and those injunctions were lifted from abroad earlier this year. So there's been a lot of chat about this on social media for quite some time, and it's not good for West Ham. I mean, West Ham, the last thing West Ham need is a lack of stability at the club. I mean, the only thing I would say with it is Karen Brady obviously resigned, a few weeks ago. I'm amazed she hasn't come under a little bit more pressure for her associations with Sullivan. A lot, for someone who's meant to be so highly regarded and respected, for her associations with Sullivan.
Yeah, I think there's a BBC Panorama program at 8 o'clock tonight UK. So I wonder what more revelations are going to come out then. Yeah, it's not. West Ham are in a bit of a mess to say the least.
Yeah, I can't imagine their fans are too disappointed if they get a change of ownership though, with the direction the club's been going.
So one of the big stories yesterday was Ericsson. He collapsed again on the pitch. Obviously, very sad. I think the good news is that it sounds like he's all right. It sounds like the pacemaker worked. He was unconscious on the pitch. I know, James, that you have some pretty strong opinions on this.
I just think it's a bit selfish of him to play, and then he plays, had a heart condition kind of thing. I'm surprised they've got insurance from the club and the authorities. Yeah, I just think you've had a second chance in life. Look, happily he's okay and its pacemaker's worked. But I just it's like Tom Lockyer, the Luton guy who wanted to come back after two or three incidents. Yeah, and I just remember when James Taylor, the ex-cricketer, 10 years ago, he was very lucky to survive, and he retired instantly. So, uh, look, he's okay, but yeah, I'm a little bit surprised that he continued. Really, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it just brings back memories of that first time. When I think most of us were watching it live, right, when he collapsed, and you just thought he was a goner, and somehow they saved him, finished the match as well, which I still can't believe. I remember saying at the time, all we need now is he's going to come back on and score the winner. It's amazing the turnaround. So he's very lucky. I mean, just to be alive from the first one, but I'm sure he's got the message now that probably time to call it a day.
I do think it's interesting because I think you potentially setting precedents in terms of. I know, James, you're very much of the belief that he shouldn't play again, and I think it's very difficult because obviously every situation is going to be different in terms of what the actual issue was. And what you don't want to necessarily is force people into having to give up the game if they do have a medical episode. But conversely, as you touched on to me privately earlier, is you've got to think about also obviously family, but fans and people like that who have to witness these things. Everyone who's witnessed the Ericsson, for example, is it's pretty ugly stuff.
It is when you got kids around the place. I know they put screens up, but
He's not a
it's
horse,
just friendly.
James.
I know, but they did. Look, I have my views in it. I just think you're lucky to survive, kind of thing. You're not that have been some players who have passed away on the pitch, kind of thing. Mark Vivian Ferre, kind of thing, the ex West Ham player who sadly lost his life, kind of thing. So yeah. Anyway, look, he's safe. We can continue.
So, Real Madrid elections. Perez, unsurprisingly, got voted in last night. Not much changes. Obviously, he's promised that 150 million euro superstar. Who it is remains to be seen, as there's been a lot of speculation as to whether it's Elise, Kvaratskhelia, or however you pronounce him. I mean, he'd be the one I would go for personally, but I can't imagine that much will change at Real Madrid, apart from spending obscene amounts of money again for a unbalanced team, probably.
I did like how he drops in these clues, right? He's like, I'm going to bid for a player. It's not in the Premier League. It's not a defender or a midfielder. Like, I mean, what is this? It's kind of fun guessing who it might be.
The best part is when that player's going to say no thanks.
All he said he's going to bid for one, right? He didn't say he would definitely sign him. But they've got a bit of history of this, haven't they? Where they make these campaign promises, and they tend to do it, right? I think Luis Figo, excuse me, was the famous one, right? Who played for Barcelona, and everyone thought, wow, that's a bold claim. I mean, they got it done.
They must have had a few hints that he was willing to, cross clubs as such.
Yeah, I'm sure they tapped him up first.
But that'll be interesting to see. And then I think the final thing we'll touch on before we get into all the World Cup stuff, James, I know you love an award, so talk me through Premier League Young Player of the Year, Manager of the Year, because you're not happy. You're not a happy man, are you?
Far from it. Young Player of the Year nominations: Ryan Cherky, Max Darren, Junior Krupi, Kobe Mainu, Rian Gamora, and Nick O'Reilly. I can understand two and a half of them, O'Reilly and Junior Krupi. Ryan Cherky, the award shouldn't be for his age. I think he's 23, 24. But the other three, please. Like, Max Darren's played about 100 minutes in the Premier League this season. I know he scored a goal against Everton. Kobe Mainu didn't play for the first 6 months of the season. And Rio and Gamora he's a special talent. But, like, considering the players that are not on the list, like Ryan, the Bournemouth winger, who came in January to replace Simeone, but unbelievable 6 months. Matheus Mane at Wolves, Mateus Fernandes at West Ham. You've got Adam Wharton, Alex Scott, Kushanoff at Man City.
Your favourite, James. Your favourite.
I don't rate him as highly as other people do, but he's had a pretty impressive last 6 months, especially when he's been playing with Mark Gay as well and formed a half decent partnership there as well. And then the Player of the Year award, no Igor Thiago in it, no Antoine Semenyo in it, but we have got the Arsenal goalkeeper David Raya in it. I mean, it's just remarkable. I mean, David Raya is the first goalkeeper to be on it since 2015, I believe, since David De Gea single-handedly got United in the Champions League kind of thing. So, yeah, it's a bit of a shambles. And then Manager of the Year award, a certain Spanish lad in the Midlands is not on it. Please explain.
I think these awards, they lose any meaning when you see some of the nonsense. Like, I think Mainu was obviously interesting on that list, because it ties in with Carrick being on the managers list as well. I think it's just almost insulting to the other managers when you see credence given to an award like this. I think you just have to take it with a pinch of salt, really, and just, when they're going to pick these sort of contenders and nominations, it's not worth the paper it's written on.
I think with the Young Player Award, in the American sports, they tend to have Rookie of the Year, don't they? And I think that's kind of the spirit of the award, isn't it? It should be that, like, this is your first year playing sort of first team football, right? It definitely shouldn't be someone like Cherky, who's an established player who's been playing for several years. And I don't know exactly how you would define it, but certainly they could just bring the age down. That would be an obvious thing. I think you should probably be a teenager if you're winning this award.
Well, what you could do is you could have something like, once you've made 20 appearances or something in the league, that would be a cut-off point, or 19 for a half a season. Once you've done that in a season, you're no longer eligible, for the award in future years, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think so, because I think we've had players winning it multiple times, haven't we? Where they win it when they're 20 and they win it again when they're 21, and they're already like £100 million footballers. It's ridiculous.
Okay, let's go to the big event. As James says, starts on Thursday, the World Cup. How excited are we, gents, for the World Cup?
I'd say moderately excited. I mean, I look forward to it. I think that with this new format, I think we've got to remember that there is going to be quite a lot of dross for the first couple of weeks, which, I mean, is always the case, I think, with the World Cup, but far more so this time, because all these extra teams that they've added are I mean, they're weaker than the normal 32 teams, right, by definition. So I think everyone's just got to sort of, temper expectations and maybe don't watch every match for the first couple of weeks, because you might get seriously fed up, I think, by that point.
Yeah, I mean, there's 72 games in 16 days for the group stages. So it's going to be 104 games in the World Cup, which is an increase of 40 games. So you got an extra round, you got the last 32 games. So back in the day as kids, I watch every game, try and watch every game kind of thing, and be annoyed that the last group games are on at the same time they are this year as well, kind of thing, for obvious reasons. But I think with the time zone difference here in the UK, it's going to be a struggle to watch any more than about 15 or 20 kind of thing. But yeah, 72 games is going to be, as you say, John, going to be a lot of dross, an awful lot of dross going on. And teams now, because they can be finished third, those 8 teams that can finish third can get in, they can be like, well, we're happy to get 2 points almost. Can almost get 2 nil draws and go through, not win a game and go through to the last 32. So could be looking at that where games are just 0-0 to 1-1 because both teams are happy with a point because they know they can get into the top 8 of the third place playoffs.
I do find I've become increasingly disillusioned by international football. Maybe Southgate for the last few years has finally hammered out the last levels of enthusiasm for it. But I do find when your team's had a decent year club-wise, that feels like a bigger or more important, honestly, than international football at this stage. But I'm sure as the tournament goes on, we will get into a little bit more. So one thing we wanted to talk about was the 10 most so England is sort of renowned for the heartbreak within the World Cup. Obviously not won it since 1966. And what we wanted to do today was something a little bit different to start with. And we were going to look at the 10 most heartbreaking storylines involving England and World Cups. And after that, we'll have a look at, other memories we have of World Cups and potentially looking ahead to this World Cup. But obviously number one has to be 1986 in Mexico and the Maradona Handball. Obviously it came on the back of him scoring an absolutely, probably the best World Cup goal ever afterwards in the same game. What were your memories, gents?
Well, I don't know about you two. I think we're all about the same age, aren't we? So I was 6 when this happened. And I do have vague recollections, maybe not of actually watching the incident live, but certainly playing football with friends afterwards and someone would be like, oh, I've done a Maradona, and they just punch the ball into the goal kind of thing. I remember all the national outrage. What you don't realise, of course, because you're quite young at the time, is this is quite soon after the Falklands, right? So the two countries have been literally at war only a handful of years earlier. So fair amount of tension around that. I sort of think this incident is quite definitive about English football and Argentinian football, and I think that we do, as we're going to see from this list, we quite often end up in the sort of unlucky losers or we got cheated type role. I wonder if sometimes we're a little bit eager to adopt that role, we feel a certain amount of comfort in, oh, we lost but only because we got cheated type thing. And then you look at the Argentinians, I mean, let's be honest, right? They're the total opposite. Their culture seems to be well, you do whatever you take to win, and if you cheat and get away with it, you've been clever and it's worth doing. So I do think that this is not only the sort of number one incident, but I feel like it's quite defining of the sort of the two football cultures. What do you think?
James?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. They'll win at all costs. I was actually watching highlights of the 2002 World Cup last night, and Argentina got a penalty, and it was a clear dive by, I think, Hernan Crespo. I think it was dived against the Swedes. It might not be her. Anyway, they got the penalty, and when the penalty was struck, he was almost level, Crespo, with the ball on the penalty spot when it was struck to equalise 1-1. Now, they went out anyway, but it was just they'll win at all costs. And, yeah. And on that goal, the Maradona handball, Peter Shilton, I know you're only 6 foot. Maradona's 5'6", 5'7" back in the day. Got out jumped by him, clearly out jumped by him. It's just what are you doing, Shilton? And then he played another World Cup, Shilton, 1990, when he was clearly absolutely finished in his career. But yeah, it's but But that
James.
game, I mean, I was only 5, so I don't remember it at all. But just going back to the first goal by Maradona, outrageously good goal. But Steve Hodge, hack him, but he tried to and he couldn't get near him. And Peter Reid kind of thing. So yeah, it's brilliant goal. But yeah, I kind of quite like it, knowing that there's no VAR, win at all costs, take the risk. You're not going to get sent off, and if no one referee didn't spot it, happy days kind of thing.
When you say Steve Hodge should have hacked him, I mean, back in those days, that is literally what would happen to Maradona in a lot of matches.
Yeah.
I heard that in '82, apparently the Italians just like kicked him out of the tournament, and I think that's what you got to remember when people start trying to compare players across eras, right? Like Messi versus Maradona, and like it's a different game. I think it's just impossible to really compare one with the other because the way you got defended. It just was so much harder, I think, to be a skillful flair player in those days. Whereas now, of course, you get barely touched and you get a free kick and the other guy gets booked and then he has to be careful. And, I think the likes of Maradona, probably if they were playing today and he might take care of himself a bit better, I'd imagine as well. I think he'd be unbelievable.
I think it was Pele, was it 74 World Cup? He got hacked to pieces as well. And it is a shame, but that's just the way football was in those days. So I think that's a comfortable number one, to be honest. And I think it would probably be the number one memory of almost anyone, certainly on these shores, with regard to World Cups. Second one we're going to talk about is Frank Lampard, 2010 in South Africa. I think it was the last 16 match against Germany. England 2-0 down, got back to 2-1. Matthew Upson pulled one back. I mean, really?
I know. When I rewatched it, I couldn't have even told you that Matthew Upson had gone to a World Cup, let alone scored at one. He probably tells people that in the pub, and they're like, "Yeah, all right, mate, whatever."
And then obviously Lampard hit the underside of the crossbar. It's bounced miles over the line. Has bounced back. Out the goal. Germany have scored a couple more late on to win 4-1. It looks a bit of a drubbing, but it definitely wasn't at the time. And these are sort of fine margins in football. And I think it's interesting when you listen to the commentary for that. I think it's Mark Lawrenson was going crazy about how FIFA need to be embarrassed and they need goal line technology and all these sorts of things. And obviously we now have that. What were your sort of thoughts, memories on that?
I think it might have been Keegan actually, wasn't it, on the commentary? But yeah, well, I mean that's why this one's a little bit frustrating because you can sympathise with the officials, I think, with these because if you think of where the linesman is, he's never going to be level with the goal line when someone's shooting from 30 yards. Which I mean, it's a brilliant goal by the way by Lampard. So I mean, I think that's why it was frustrating because there was this debate about the goal line technology. It'd been tested, we knew it worked, but Blatter was always very much sort of anti-technology. Which I mean, when it comes to VAR, I'm not a big fan of VAR, so I can sympathise with that. But the goal line stuff just always felt like a bit of a no-brainer because the linesman and the ref, if they can't tell, then they kind of have to say no goal, right? I don't think you can just guess and say, yeah, it's a goal. Then you got to err on the side of no goal. So it's a tough one.
And what's interesting is last World Cup, Argentina's third goal in extra time, Messi's, they used goal line technology then to award that goal.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it was given at the time, but obviously it had to be checked. But it was very close after I think Loris had made the save before. Any memories on that, James?
What being my swearing at a TV at the time, and then watching it live, just going absolutely berserk. I mean, yeah, it was just they got battered England for the first when they were 2-0 down against a half decent Germany side, but yeah, and then I mean, it was miles over. It wasn't even close up to thing. But I think John's point of like a linesman or assistant referee, whatever they're called, they're so far away. Like it was from how far away? 20, 25 yards?
Good 25
maybe even further,
yards,
wasn't it? Yeah. So keep and he's probably 50 yards away from it, kind of thing. So yeah, it's at the time it was a lot of effing and blinding going on, shouting at the TV, kind of thing. But yeah, it's just again, it's I think John's point is like we always seem to be on the wrong side of these decisions, kind of thing. We've never got a decision where we go, oh, actually, that's a good one for us, kind of thing.
We've never had a controversial did it cross the line decision go in our favour, have we?
That was
No,
miles
that's
over
right,
the line
Joe.
as well, 66. Absolutely miles over the line. It's just because the Germans, West Germans, couldn't believe we'd beaten them at Wembley.
There were a couple of things. So, watching this back the other night, there were a couple of things that stood out. Firstly, those bloody vuvuzela things in South Africa. Oh my goodness! Every match you watch from that tournament, that's all you hear. I'm sorry, that's not a good instrument. But the other thing is, and this is kind of a theme when you watch back World Cups, just the ordinary footballers that you see playing for England. And I mentioned Upson. I mean, he gets well beaten for the first goal. You've got Calamity James in goal, and I know sometimes he got a little bit of a harsh deal, but the fact is, you saw him; he was poor for a couple of the German goals, and just not at the levels of some of the other players. And the other one that stood out was Gareth Barry. The comical sight of him trying to run back and chase down a German counterattack. Honestly, I think I might be quicker than him. It's ridiculous. So yeah, just I think you realise how down the years, just how many sort of average players end up sneaking into English teams alongside. You tend to have a few sort of world class players, don't you? But yeah, you just from one World Cup to the next, there's always some random players that sneak in.
There's no way to talk about Anthony Gordon and Madueke, John.
And
Just one thing on the 2010 World Cup was, do you remember Luis Suarez talking of South American players and doing it at all costs when he handled the ball on the line against Ghana? Asamoah Gyan missed a penalty, and then they went through in last minute of extra time, and everyone going, what a disgrace he was. But we obviously know Suarez incidents, what he's done in his career at Liverpool as well. And then the Howard Webb not sending off Nigel de Jong in the final on the karate kick against, I think it was Xavi Alonso, wasn't it? When he just didn't send him off for a high boot kind of in his chest kind of thing in the final. Yeah, and
I think what was interesting in that final, obviously Spain beat Netherlands 1-0, and it was very late goal from Iniesta. But we always think about, obviously, your Xavi's, Iniestas, and in terms of those Spanish teams as being incredible teams. They've only just got over the line in that game against the Netherlands. It's not a Netherlands team you look at and go, oh, that was an incredible team. And I think we end up, we always talk about it when it comes to other football, but the sort of narratives we apply to players' legacies and things like that. Obviously, they've had loads of success elsewhere as well. But these are the sort of real career-defining tournaments. Let's talk about Simeone getting Beckham sent off in 1998 in France. Who wants to start with that one?
Well, I guess I could start with this one. Well, I mean, the thing is with this, I think what's interesting about this is at the time, Beckham ends up just sort of becoming the villain, doesn't he? Back in the UK. Even though I think you watch it back now, and I mean, it's never a red card. He's barely touched him, and Simeone goes down like he's been shot, doesn't he? And I think now everyone's realised that David Beckham is, one of the nicest blokes you could possibly meet. At least that's how it seems, right? He's been in the public eye so much, and he just always seems to be a decent fella. So I think at the time, because he was a young, sort of good-looking, flash guy, and he's playing for Man United. No one liked Man United back in the 90s. So I think it was sort of ripe to become a bit of a villain. But I think what it also reminds you back then is the power that newspapers had, right? I mean, young people now would think, what are you talking about? But it really was like if the Sun or a major newspaper like that decided that was going to be the narrative, right? That it was going to be all about Beckham. It was his fault. He let the country down. Then people just sort of followed along with that like sheep. And so he got some fairly horrendous abuse then at every match for the next few years, which I may or may not have joined in with. But, you're young and you just kind of go along with it, right?
He got absolute pelters. I mean, it wasn't just a little bit. I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, you do have to feel a little bit for him.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the news headline there from the 1988. I think it was a Sun who did it.
So in that game, last 16 match ended up drawing 2-2. Beckham got sent off in the 47th minute. So, it really was a decisive moment in that match. And I think what's interesting, and people forget almost, that we ended up losing 4-3 on penalties with Ince and Batty missing penalties. I mean, you have to ask yourself a few questions when you've got David Batty and Paul Ince taking penalties.
Yeah, but if you go and watch that game, so England went 1-0 down, and then, to be fair, Michael Owen did his usual diving again. Dived, sheer top bins penalty, and then Owen scored that wonder goal kind of thing. Paul Scholes missed a great chance to make it 3-1 just before when his ball came across and he left foot and just went wide of the post kind of thing. If it was 3-1, I know then they equalised again Argentina, and it was 2-2. I think it was 2-2 at half time, wasn't it? And then Beckham got sent off. Was it 2-2 at half time?
Yeah, it was 2-2 at half time. Yeah, Argentina, they scored that nice free kick routine, right on the stroke of half time.
Yeah. I mean, England had a very good side, and then they went toe-to-toe, and then Sol Campbell, perfectly good goal disallowed in the 82nd minute something from the Dan Anderson corner header. No one near the keeper, he just came out flapping. And the referee, Nielsen, then didn't just give the free kick. All the England boys are celebrating. Well, half the team are celebrating down in the corner. He allows the Argentinian lads to take a quick free kick. And it's only because Darren Anderson makes a last-ditch tackle at the end that I think Batistuta or whoever it was, Crespo, could have put it in the back of the net to make it 3-2. It's just, then it went to penalties and...
I think the tough ones... So I think with all these is you have to take into account how good England were at the time. England had a good team then, and they would have gone very deep in that tournament, I think, if they'd got a result there. And I think that makes it worse in many respects than, even if it was a bigger misfortune, but they were an average team. We touched on Upson and Co earlier. That was a really, really good England team. It was one that, could easily have gone all the way, and just didn't happen.
It was a good World Cup, actually. The French 1998 World Cup. I enjoyed it if you look back at it and things like that. Like
so that final, I don't know. Do you remember that? Do you remember the final? So before the final, all the Ronaldo stuff. So obviously, France have walloped Brazil in the end, but there's all that mystery about what, because Ronaldo wasn't on the team sheet, and then he was on the team sheet, and then he played, and he was bang average, and it was. They've talked about him having a seizure and all this sort of stuff, but it was all very, should we say, unsatisfactory. I think there can't be many bigger individual stories in any World Cup, given the stakes at play.
Yeah, just going back to that, you mentioned the Campbell goal in extra time. I mean, it is weird watching that now, like with all the wrestling and stuff that goes on at corners now, and it's just, there was nothing. There wasn't even like an appeal or anything from the Argentinians. It was really strange. It was just a goal. Everyone just seemed like, okay, goal. And then the ref, like, immediately he's in there giving it. And it was kind of a curious one.
Does it make you suspicious, John?
I'm not going to go that far. I don't know.
Those tournaments back in the day, do you remember golden goal in extra times? Those were still tournaments with golden goal in extra time kind of thing. So England, it wasn't in extra time, but they had golden goal in the 98 World Cup. But the one memory of that World Cup was a Bergkamp goal in Marseille when he took it down from Frank de Boer, long ball from the back, and he took it down against Argentina in quarterfinals. Took it down over his shoulder and then bent it outside of foot to put it in the top corner kind of thing. It's a brilliant goal.
Is that right? That would have been golden goal. So Campbell thought he had literally scored the winner.
No, it was in. He did that in. Was that an extra time? The goal, I can't remember. Anyway, but there was golden goal in that tournament.
No, I think Campbell was regular time.
Yeah,
really? Time, okay, that would explain it then.
Yeah.
Because the reaction would have been even worse if you thought you'd actually won the match and gone through.
I heard a story about Euro 96. So when we were playing Germany in the semis, obviously we had a couple of great chances, didn't we, to score golden goal in extra time. I think Gascoigne hit the post? No, Anderton hit the post. I think Gascoigne just missed one. But apparently the players had planned that if they scored a golden goal, they were all just going to run off down the tunnel, which I think would have been just a fantastic celebration.
Next on our list was 1994. So this was actually qualifying, and Koeman. The World Cup was in United States, but England had obviously a massive game. Talk us through what happened with Koeman. Obviously, lucky boy.
Yeah, I mean, to set the scene, Norway unexpectedly have a really good qualifying campaign and win the group. So yeah, it comes down to either England or Holland, and we just have to get a draw out in Holland essentially to qualify. And I remember this vividly. I remember the outrage from everybody that Koeman hadn't got sent off. So David Platt is clean through. Koeman's done for pace, pulls him back, and at first everyone thinks that the ref's given a penalty. And then it turns out, oh, actually it was on the edge of the box. They changed it to a free kick. And then on top of that, I mean, it's just such an open and shut case that he gets a red card, but he only gives him a yellow. So it was definitely a complete injustice. And then, of course, to rub salt into the wounds, Koeman, 5 minutes later, scores a free kick, which, honestly, you watch it back, not very impressive from Seaman. Like, the positioning, he's almost lined up on the post. It's unbelievable. And I mean, I think I'd have had a chance to score in that goal, to be honest with you, because all you got to do is clip it over the wall, and I mean, he's not going to get it. And but one thing I will say, watching this game back, is Frank Rijkaard scores a goal that's disallowed for offside, and he's miles on. It's not even close. And back in the day, this is one thing about VAR. I know there's still like controversial decisions with offside or whatever, but I mean, it's cleared up these ones that weren't even close. And I do think, to be fair to the linesmen, even before VAR, I think they had improved enormously, because back in the 90s, you'd have goals disallowed, and you're talking just several yards that it was wrong. But I do think it's funny, you watch it back and you think, oh, I don't remember everyone talking about that at the time. Everyone was just focused on the Koeman one. But yeah, it really was memorable, because, of course, for England not to qualify for the World Cup, I mean, it has happened on other occasions, but it's still like a pretty big blow.
It was a big blow, particularly after Italia 90. Everyone was like, oh, so excited, enthusiastic, and then you don't make it. It's one thing I would give Southgate a lot of credit for, is we haven't had any qualifying dramas at all in recent years. We look at likes of Italy struggling, and, you sort of take it for granted just appearing at these tournaments now. But that was painful viewing 94 in America. Although, as a Villa fan, it was interesting in as much as we obviously had quite a few players playing for Ireland at the time. So, and they obviously beat Italy in that opening game with Ray Houghton. But it was my thought in watching that was obviously playing in the heat, and just how that sort of relates to this year's competition, obviously that being in the US as well.
Yeah,
no water breaks.
With the stadiums now, I think some of the stadiums are a little bit different, because they've got some of them have got roofs, and I think they'll set the kickoffs maybe so that those get the afternoon games and stuff. But there'll definitely be one or two where it'll just be sweltering heat.
Yeah, I mean, going back to that Koeman incident, so there is a documentary as Graham Taylor that he's got a microphone on at the time it's happening. It's definitely worth a watch, kind of thing. I think it was Don Howe's assistant, or it might not be Don Howe, but anyway, so you can actually hear him abusing the linesman at the time, kind of thing, and they're all up in arms. But yeah, it's just, so England actually didn't qualify. I was looking through for 74 World Cup and the 78 World Cup, back-to-back World Cup thing, and didn't qualify, kind of thing. So it's I think 94 is the last time England didn't qualify for the World Cup. I'm pretty sure of that, yeah.
So the next one is that Rooney red card in 2006, where we had Cristiano Ronaldo still going strong. It's funny when you look back at this, when you see how young he looks. But obviously he played a part in Rooney getting sent off. It wasn't the be all and end all, but again, another huge blow to England. Obviously, they ended up drawing Portugal before losing on penalties, I think it was.
Yeah, penalties again, of course. But yeah, watching this one back, I mean, it wasn't. It was a red card, right? I mean, he's literally stamped on Carvalho's crown jewels. It's pretty blatant. I think it was the wink afterwards, wasn't it, from Ronaldo that got everyone riled up. What's incredible, of course, so that's 2006. If you'd have said at the time that Ronaldo's going to be playing in the 2026 World Cup, unbelievable. There's actually 4 players, I heard this the other day, that from that tournament that are playing in this one. I don't think we've got time to do it as a quiz, but the big two are obvious, right? Ronaldo and Messi. But also Modric, he played in that one and he's going to be in this one. And then Ochoa, who's the Mexican goalkeeper, he's the 4th. So it's some achievement. To play in World Cups 20 years apart is pretty remarkable.
Particularly Messi and Ronaldo. I mean, it's not just playing, it's not being some dodgy Mexican goalkeeper. It's being literally the 2 greatest players of all time, pretty much.
Yeah, well, goalkeepers in general, right? That's what you would guess because they've got a bit more longevity. But to be a sort of tricky striker, yeah, amazing.
I think the one thing with that incident, sorry, just to interrupt you there, wasn't Ronaldo at Man United as well? They were teammates.
Yep. That's right.
Time. Yeah.
There's quite an interesting video where early on in that game, before the game started, when they were messing around in warm-ups, Ronaldo came up behind Rooney and didn't headbutt him, but sort of gave him. There was a little bit of it looked like a little bit of aggro. I don't know if it was more playful than anything else, but I think Ronaldo knew that he could potentially wind Rooney up. I think the one thing about the incident, so obviously it was a clear stamp, but the referee hadn't shown any inclination to bring out a red card until Ronaldo got involved. Obviously, Rooney pushed Ronaldo away, and then suddenly the red card came out. And I think there would have been a bit of confusion at the time as to exactly what the red card was actually for. So I think that didn't really help the situation. I think what was interesting about that World Cup was just the number of yellow and red cards. Absolutely smashed all sorts of records. And then obviously that was the World Cup where we had Graham Poll giving 3 yellows in one game. Very kind to him.
I did also notice Paul Robinson in goal for the penalties. I mean, they missed 2, but they literally missed them. Like, he didn't save any. We just have a lot of average goalkeepers down the years.
Still got one, John. Still got one.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. I don't know when England have had like genuinely kind of like star goalkeeper, and even watching like David Seaman in a few of these tournaments, he's had some dodgy moments at the highest level. And I think everyone just sort of thinks, oh yeah, David Seaman, just because he for so long was like the England #1 and the Arsenal keeper, obviously had a good club career. But I still don't really feel like he was on that sort of world-class sort of elite level. And when it comes to things like penalty shootouts, and you see Robinson not getting near them, Shilton famously in 1990 went the correct way for every penalty, but didn't save any of them. And we focus so much on the players that have missed penalties, right, in shootouts and sort of blame them. But we've very rarely had goalkeepers that actually step up and make a bunch of key saves. I think that's probably where maybe you can credit Pickford. I think he's actually at least made a few saves in penalty shootouts.
So I think what was interesting was the players who actually missed in that penalty shootout, by the way. So you had Gerrard and Lampard and Carragher. So, a lot of the time when we've had misses in penalties, it's been your lesser players. So it's been your Batties and Inces and players you wouldn't necessarily expect to score. But when Gerrard and Lampard are 2 of the players, regarded almost as generational type players, for both of them to actually miss penalties as well. It was interesting. I think the goalkeeping situation. Look, we just haven't had great goalkeepers. There's no sugarcoating it. And when Jordan Pickford is regarded as one of the greatest England goalkeepers of all time, I think it says everything. He isn't an elite goalkeeper. There's a reason why the big clubs haven't come in for him, or bigger clubs, and I think he's not great.
he's never even been linked with big clubs that I can remember. I can't remember stories saying, "Oh, Man United are after Jordan Pickford" or anything. I don't know. Maybe there have been rumors like that, but I don't know. Do you think that the goalkeeper thing is this something cultural? Like, do you think we just kind of consider goalkeeper to be like an afterthought position in England, where it's kind of like, well, just stick someone in goal, someone who's no good, yeah, out on the pitch, rather than really feeling like that is a crucial position, that it's a difference maker, or is this just sort of random chance because there's so few goalkeepers down the years that whether you get a world class one is a little bit of luck.
I would err towards the latter part. I think what's amazing to me is when you go back and watch all the footage of these games, and if you go back and watch old, very early days Premier League, old, Football League stuff, is the quality of the goalkeepers. So the goalkeeper I grew up with, who was just incredible, was Neville Southall, and he was clearly world number one at various points. And you go back and he'd make some incredible saves, but I've also seen matches where he was abysmal. And I think the standard of goalkeeping, I don't think people realise how high the standard of goalkeeping is now relative to all the previous generations. I do think there's a bit of fortune in terms of nationalities now, in terms of the great goalkeepers. But, it's out of all the areas on the pitch, I think goalkeepers is the one that has evolved way more than some of the other positions. And people don't really appreciate how fast the ball was traveling these days. The amount of swerve on the ball and all these other things, the other demands on goalkeepers in terms of being able to use their feet, all these, you have all the set piece shenanigans as well. You touched on Peter Shilton earlier. Imagine Peter Shilton trying to deal with, a set piece nowadays. He won't get anywhere near. The small goalkeepers now are all 6'3". I always remember with Peter Shilton, because I was a goalkeeper at that time, he was almost an inspiration because he was so short as a goalkeeper. And, he was 6 foot. And there just weren't that many massive goalkeepers at the time. But I think the goalkeeping thing is interesting.
One thing I always notice when you watch old clips is goalkeepers getting chipped, and because I just don't think keepers really get chipped anymore. I think it's so incredibly hard because they're just so athletic that even if you get it right under the crossbar, they'll tend to get back and tip it over. But then you watch old clips and they're getting chipped all the time. It just you get something just under the bar and they normally don't get to it.
I think the training that the keepers do nowadays is just so beyond comprehension as to what they used to do, in terms of how, as you say, how athletic they are and everything else. It's just moved on so much. But I think that chipping point is an interesting one. And you even see Ronaldinho's goal, which we'll come on to. Seaman got nowhere near it. Right, next one.
Quickly, can we just talk about goalkeepers? Can we just talk mention to Rob Green in 2010 against USA?
It's got to be the low point. We've had a lot of bad keepers, but I don't know. I'm not sure it gets any worse.
Where do you even begin with that? One thing I would say. So I was thinking about World Cup players just quickly, who I used to love watching, and one of them was Chilavert. And he was interesting as he used to score so many goals. He'd take free kicks, penalties, all sorts. And obviously we wouldn't see him on a week to, I think we take for granted now, we see all the best players in the world play all the time, Champions League, non-stop coverage. But back in the day, you used to have players who'd play in South America and places like that, and then you'd see them rolled out once every World Cup. And you might be able to find the odd clip of Chilavert banging in another free kick from 30 yards out, but it was just fun to watch, players like that who we just didn't know much about.
Yeah, it was I think a little bit more exciting. They were more exotic, right? Because if Chilavert was playing now, he'd probably be playing for Crystal Palace or something, right? Just wouldn't be quite as interesting.
Next one was. Talk us through the 1982 World Cup, John, and the format that we saw England get knocked out with?
Yeah,
So World Cup in Spain.
82, yeah. There's been a lot of different formats down the years in World Cups, and you look at this one. So this was one of those where they had two group stages, right? You had the first group stage where it's groups of four, and then teams that go through go into a second group stage with groups of three, and the winners of each group qualified. And so anytime you got groups of three, it's always dodgy because you can't all play at the same time, right? Someone's got to sit out the last game while the other two play, and there are actually a couple of pretty notorious games in this tournament. In the first group stage, there was one that's known as the Disgrace of Gijón, which is when West Germany and Austria played each other, and a 1-0 win was going to see West Germany and Austria both qualify. Guess what? It finished 1-0 to West Germany. I think once they went 1-0 up, no one crossed the halfway line, basically. And a very similar game as well with Spain against Northern Ireland that saw them both go through. But England, yeah, they actually did pretty well. They won all three games in the first group stage, went into the second one, and they drew 0-0 with West Germany, drew 0-0 with Spain. So unbeaten in the whole tournament, but they got knocked out because West Germany beat Spain in the other match. And it just seems very unsatisfactory, and I get it, right? I mean, they could have beaten Spain in the last game and gone through, so it's not like it was out of their hands. But I think anytime you are unbeaten over that number of matches, like it feels like someone should have to beat you to knock you out of the tournament, don't you think?
So West Germany went and lost in the final to Italy actually as well. So it wasn't as if that England had an easy sort of mini group.
Yeah, and Spain are the hosts, of course.
It's a nonsense of a tournament then if you have it like two group stages and you don't lose and you get knocked out. The abiding memory of watching the 82 World Cup is the West German goalkeeper, Schumacher, who came through the French lad, Battisson, and broke his back and his vertebra in his back. And it was given as a goal kick. Not even a foul, let alone a red card, just given as a goal kick. And then obviously Marco Tardelli, all that celebration, that shot he hit from the Italian, I think it was a midfielder back in the day, scored from like 25 yards out. I think it was in the final, yeah. But those looking back on those, yeah, the 82 World Cup. I think that's when Brian Robson scored after 20 odd seconds, wasn't it, as well? The fastest goal in World Cup history, I believe, the 82 World Cup. I think I'm right in saying, and I watched it last week anyway.
Next one is the 1974. Qualifying again. So obviously these are times when England are struggling to even qualify. So they needed to beat Poland, I believe. So I think it was quite a strange sort of set of fixtures in the build up to this. They had 4 group games, I think it was. But it basically all came down to England having to beat Poland. And Tomaszewski, or however you pronounce him, he safe to say had the game of his life. I think the score ended up 1-1. But England had 34 attempts on goal. And check this one out, 26 corners. Arsenal would have had double-figure goals, with that number of corners.
Yeah, I saw those stats because I think sometimes these things go down in folklore, right? This is one of those games that, as an England fan, you always hear about, right? The clown, he was known as the goalkeeper, and often these things get exaggerated. So you think, yeah, I don't know, how bad really was it? But like you said, I mean, 36 shots to 2 or whatever, 26 corners, absolutely murdered them. The thing that, until I watched the replay of it, the thing I didn't realise is that Poland's goal is an absolute howler by Shilton. And again, we talk about goalkeepers. They've only had 2 shots in the match. And the Poland goal, it just goes straight through him, like proper howler. So even with all the missed chances or whatever, I mean, they still should have won the game because Poland were barely in it. What's interesting, though, even though we absolutely murdered Poland and they scraped through, they actually ended up finishing 3rd in that World Cup. They did pretty well. They won their group. They beat Argentina and Italy in the group, and then they beat Brazil in the 3rd place playoff. So they I guess weren't a bad team, and it just, I know your favourite saying, Luke, fine margins, right? And it just makes you wonder if England had managed to beat them and qualify. I mean, who knows? Who knows what they would have done?
So that was West Germany winning in Germany. So one thing you do see quite a few host nations having won the tournament over the years. Next one is qualifying. The qualifiers in 1978. So obviously we missed out on qualifying in 74 and 78, which I think is what, again, so some of these stories need context. So that 82 defeat, or getting knocked out without losing a game, it hurts more because England had missed out on qualifying in both 74 and 78 in fairly tough situations. So talk us through the situation with regard to that qualifying in 1978.
Yeah, I think this is just an example of how the UEFA qualifying is a bit of a joke sometimes, because you get these absolute Mickey Mouse teams playing against the elite sides. And this was a perfect example where you had a group containing England, Italy, Finland, and Luxembourg, and only the winners would qualify. So what it came down to in the end, Italy beat England in Italy, and we beat them at Wembley. So then it just came down to goal difference. Who's going to thump the minnows by the most number of goals? And the order of games makes a difference as well. So Italy had both of the minnows at the end. They had Finland at home and then Luxembourg in the last game. So it does help a little bit when you kind of know what you need to do. And they ended up beating Finland 6-1, which was decisive. But the good news is, I don't know if you saw this in the news, but UEFA are actually changing the qualifying for future World Cups. So you're not going to have England playing against the likes of San Marino anymore. They're going to change it to a little bit more like the Champions League format, I think, where you play a bunch of different teams and then there'll be sort of overall standings. I don't think they've confirmed exactly how it's going to work, but it's about time, because I mean, every other confederation has pre-qualifying. UEFA are the only ones that say, yeah, Germany's going to play against Gibraltar and all this rubbish. Like, no one else does that. Even in North America, you have these small Caribbean islands. They have to play against each other to even get into the main tournament. And all the confederations do that, apart from South America, of course, because they don't have that many teams. They just play one big group. So I think that is why it's been a little bit of a lottery at times, is because ultimately you go into a group where there's only 2 or 3 teams realistically that might qualify. And so it just comes down to a small number of results.
How can these players inflate their goal tallies? Ronaldo, Kane, if they're not playing the San Marinos, Gibraltars of the world.
I hadn't thought about that. So Kane's record might be safe forever.
All jokes aside, you think there's a pretty good chance.
Well, it's like Pickford's clean sheet record, isn't it? That Graham Souness called out over the weekend and said it's a joke. He's playing a pub side kind of thing. All these records might be, as you say, might be there for a long time, if not ever.
So next one, so number 9, we have 2002 World Cup in South Korea. Quarterfinals, ended up losing 2-1 to Brazil, 1-0 up through Michael Owen. Rivaldo equalised, great goal. Before, I feel like we've touched on this already with Ronaldinho's goal against Seaman. Clearly a miss-hit cross, drifts into the far top corner. Seaman sort of flapped it in, and another very good England team ended up sort of crashing out. That was a good Brazil team as well. You had a Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Rivaldo, who actually got sent off in that game as well. You obviously had Cafu, Carlos. You had a lot of Brazilian greats in that lineup, and England could easily have got a result that day.
Does anyone think that he meant it?
No.
Nah, I mean, you look at where Ronaldinho takes that free kick from. I mean, it's prime crossing territory, isn't it? And Seaman actually wasn't far off his line, to be honest with you. So it wasn't a situation where you go, oh, look, he's miles off his line, I'm going to try something here. I think he just mishit it pretty well. I mean, it still had a lot of sort of curve and dip on it. But Seaman, reminiscent of the famous Naeem goal from the halfway line, right, where he's just sort of backpedaling and ends up sort of in a crumpled heap. And I don't know if that was a weakness of his, but yeah, again, like,
is that your screensaver?
But there's a bunch of things from Seaman in these games that I watched, for this little bit, and that game that we were talking about before, the Holland qualifier. I don't know if you watched the full highlights of that, but like the second goal that Bergkamp scores, he hits it from a reasonable distance, and you're kind of surprised that it goes in at the near post, So yeah, just dodgy goalkeeping, a running theme with England.
So, I'd say a couple of things caught my eye with that tournament. Obviously, Brazil went and beat Germany in the final. Ronaldo scored a couple of times in the final. So, England obviously lost to the winners. Obviously, South Korea made it to the semi-finals. Quite a few controversial incidents along the way in their favour in terms of goals disallowed and things like that. It was an interesting tournament, should we say.
Yeah, and I wonder with VAR whether that does reduce home advantage a little bit when you look at some of the decisions that South Korea got in that one. I mean, they just couldn't get them now, right? I think they scored a goal where it was no, I think their opponents had a goal disallowed for the ball going out of play, and it was in by like a foot. It wasn't even close.
Any thoughts on that one, James?
After England beat Denmark, like 3-0, and they were up 3-0 at half time, kind of thing, in the last 16 game. Yeah, it was a thing. But there was also the rumours about Michael Owen being injured, and it turned out he did have a hamstring injury, and somehow he played, he scored. But yeah, when Ronaldinho got sent off, I think with half an hour to go, kind of thing, England didn't create anything really. I mean, Brazil just sat in, and they didn't do anything, and England just kind of went out with a whimper, kind of thing. But yeah, it's kind of nice for Ronaldo, the original Ronaldo, after the incident in '98, to go on and win the tournament, score 2 goals in the final goal. So yeah, it's another missed opportunity by England to get a bit further than that, especially down to 10 men, kind of thing. He kind of, as I said, didn't actually really create much at all.
And then the last one we have on the list is 1950 and involves a US team. John, talk us through it.
Yeah, I mean, this is just sort of a fun one because I mean, you got to try and fill out the top 10, right? But it is a shocking result, really, when you think about it. That England never played in the World Cup before. I think we consider ourselves above it for the first few. And we had this star-studded team with the likes of Tom Finney and Stanley Matthews, Billy Wright. The Americans are literally just a bunch of semi-professionals, and they beat us 1-0. And but what's somewhat controversial, I think, is that the winning goal for the USA was scored by this guy called Joe Gatchins. And he'd been capped previously by Haiti, but he was allowed to play for the USA because he said he was planning to get US citizenship. He never did get that citizenship, and he actually then went on to play for Haiti again after the tournament. So it was sort of a bizarre situation where he was like on loan playing for the United States. I'm not sure that should have been allowed. I think maybe they should scrub this one from the record books. I think, but what is amazing is we've played the USA twice more in World Cup matches since then, which you probably remember both of those. Both have been draws, so we're yet to beat the United States in the World Cup, which is pretty disappointing.
So one interesting thing about that World Cup was that the teams played various group games and ended up going into a final group stage of 4 teams, where the team who finished top would then win the World Cup. So there was no semi-final, final, and what ended up happening was Brazil won 2 of their 3 games, 6-1 and 7-1, before they actually lost to Uruguay 2-1 in their final game, meaning that Uruguay won that World Cup. I think you could make a pretty strong case that Brazil were the best team in that tournament, but somehow a proper bottle job at the end of that game against Uruguay cost them dear. But it was interesting just to see the different formats that we've had over the years.
Yeah, not having a final was mad. Thinking about it, not having a final for the World Cup to decide just who wins the group. Yeah, ridiculous. But can I just have one honourable mention to the England 2014 Roy Hodgson era, when they finished bottom of the group, and some of the players that were in that team, talking of bad players and that England have had recently. Yeah.
Well, James, why don't you mention some of the good players that England have had in that? Because one of the things I did see when I was looking back, so if you look at things like 2010 World Cup in South Africa, was France finished bottom of their group, for example, and they had the likes of Henry, Ribéry, Gallas, Lloris, all these guys, and they finished bottom of their group. Italy finished bottom of their group, and they had your Buffons, Cannavaros of the world. So, I mean, you do get some pretty shocking results. Do you remember who in particular are you thinking of in that particular World Cup?
Well, just the likes of like Chris Smalling, Phil Jagielka, like Adam Lallana, Ross Barkley, Ricky Lambert went to that World Cup as a 23-man squad, not a 26-man squad like we've got this year, kind of thing. Yeah, it was finished bottom of that group with Roy Hodgson. Fraser Forster was the third goalkeeper behind Joe Hart and Ben Foster.
I will say we can start talking more about more general World Cup memories. So that 2014, I think that the Brazil-Germany semi-final that finished 7-1 to Germany is probably the single most incredible game of football I've seen in my entire life. Just in terms of a shocking result. I mean, it's unbelievable because Brazil were slight favourites for that game. I remember it was pretty close, but on the betting exchanges, I think it was just ever so slightly Brazil favourites playing at home, and they're 4-0 down after what was it, like 20 minutes, and I've never seen anything like it. Just a total collapse. I still don't really know what's the explanation for it, and they got pretty well beaten then again in the third place match against the Dutch. But mad, absolutely mad.
I would say variance. Look, when you're 4-0 down after 20 minutes, anything can happen to get you, just take your chances. You're 4-0 up. It's pretty easy to give up, and suddenly, the phrase, 4-0 up and playing like Brazil feels, a little bit wrong in that particular game. I mean, I do remember one game, John. It's not World Cup, but I do remember a team came to Villa Park and they just won. They were favourites, big favourites, and they lost 7-2. So it does happen to the very best teams sometimes.
COVID, no fans. Going back to that game, John. So I do remember one vivid memory of that is when I think it was David Luiz was holding up a Neymar shirt during the anthems kind of thing, because he'd broken his back in the previous quarter-final game against Colombia. Do you not remember that when he was holding up his Neymar shirt like it, whatever like that, because he couldn't play because Neymar back at the time was arguably one of the best players in the world. 7-1 at home in your own in a semi-final. Comical. Wasn't it 7-0 though as well? And they got consolation goal, something like that, wasn't it? Something ridiculous. Yeah.
So there's just a list of some of the sort of sadder moments almost from an England perspective. It feels like, given how many World Cups there's been, that's a lot of them. It doesn't feel like we've had all that much good fortune along the way, if I'm honest. Let's touch on our own sort of individual World Cup memories, and certainly for myself, Italia 90, and I'm sure it'll be the same for you guys, was such a massive tournament, because I was a season ticket holder at Villa at the time. You're absolutely obsessed by football, and it was really the first World Cup that could remember properly. So the 86 Argentina one, slightly too young, even though I started going to watch Villa back end of that year. But 1990, and it's ironic that obviously David Platt, who was watching week in, week out at Villa, he's obviously scored the goal against Belgium, 119th minute, unbelievable goal. And then he obviously scored in the quarterfinal against Cameroon as well. So for me, if you ask me the single, one of the biggest memories I have of World Cups, it would be that Italia 90. Obviously England lost on penalties again. And then the other thing would be is that England lost to Germany, and they had the likes of Bremer, Lothar Matthäus, Jurgen Klinsmann, and I actually remember seeing them in person when Villa played Inter Milan. So it was quite interesting just to actually see three genuine sort of superstars. How about you guys in terms of memories of that tournament or others?
Yeah, I've watched Klinsmann in person a few times as well. Um,
Was
the
he on his feet or was he diving?
he was pretty good for us. Yeah, the David Platt goal. I was just watching that back again the other night. It's a brilliant goal. I gotta say, like what a finish that is. What's interesting again from that game is so John Barnes scored earlier in the game, disallowed for offside, miles on, absolutely miles on. And it is funny when you watch these things back, how these and actually I think from the commentary it seems like people did accept it a little bit more readily. I think now any injustice in football, everyone goes crazy about. But there'd be a goal that's like 3 yards onside, and it gets disallowed, and they go, "Oh well, I don't know. I think that should have gone the other way," and then they just sort of carry on. So, I think the culture was a little bit different. But yeah, I think Platt's an interesting player. He obviously went overseas, didn't he? Shortly after this tournament, and so probably because he did then play in Italy for a few years. I know he came back and had sort of a couple of years at Arsenal at the end. But I think that's probably stopped him from being sort of higher up in the sort of English sort of echelon of great players. But he won Player of the Year when he was at Aston Villa. So
He was honestly, so in week in, week out, he was unbelievable. We signed him for peanuts from Crewe as a youngster, and we sold him to Bari. I think it was for 5.5 million, and yeah, I think we paid 250,000 or something for, which wasn't peanuts at the time. So I think Crewe also had they sold. Oh, it might have been Danny. It wouldn't have been Danny Murphy. There was someone else that they sold at that time as well. Crewe, name escapes me, but it came with very low expectations to Villa, and he was just literally from day one, he was just amazing. And it was such a shame to see him obviously leave to go to what we regarded at the time was a bit of a non-entity in terms of Bari.
I think they had a few players come through Crewe. There was it Rob Jones played for Liverpool, the fullback? I think he came from Crewe. Neil Lennon, I think, came from Crewe. There was another one. Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think who it
I
was.
mean, I'm pretty sure Danny Murphy came from
Yeah,
Crewe,
Danny
didn't he?
Murphy came from Crewe. That was a bit
But that
later,
was a bit
wasn't it?
later, yeah.
But there was another one in the
someone,
90s. I can't remember who it was.
there was
Yeah.
someone else at the same time as Platt. But how about you, James? Any real memories?
98, France, I've already talked about it briefly there. Just go after the success of Euro 96 kind of thing. So, obviously, England had a massive chance of winning that. And then going into 98, obviously, seeing Michael Owen as a kid for Liverpool as a 17-year-old scoring goals. And then the big conversation before the World Cup, of 98 World Cup, for Glenn Hoddle was he going to pick Gascoigne or not? And in the end, he didn't pick Gascoigne in that World Cup squad. And if you look at that team, England's team, I mentioned on Friday as well, they had a decent side. Like Sol Campbell, Tony Adams, Gary Neville. You had Ince and Batty. You had Shearer and Owen. You had some good players. Darren Anderson, Lasso. You had Merson played on the bench, and you had McManaman. You had some decent players. And yeah, again, just like if they hadn't lost to Argentina and gone through in that game, Scholes obviously as well, like they would have gone quite a long way in that tournament. I know they would have to play France, and but France were question marks over who was going to score goals for them. Like Henry was a kid. Stefan Givarch, do you remember him? He went and played for Newcastle. He was a terrible striker. But they had big question marks. And England didn't. They had two, Shearer and Owen, Owen was fighting the life out of any top-class defender. So, yeah, that was the one that almost got away kind of thing for England again. And then, obviously, that was the main one when I was 16, 17 at the time. So, that was the one I was more annoyed about than anything I can think of in recent memories anyway.
John?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting when you just go through the list that we went through, right, with red cards and then you think of all the penalty shootouts that we've lost, and there's definitely a number of tournaments that could have gone slightly differently, right? If you add them all up, it's maybe a little bit unlucky that we haven't just had one year where we had a few things go our way and win it.
So I think just talking penalties, I think one of the other ones that really stands out for me was actually the last one, because it's been very rare that a player playing for Aston Villa has actually won a World Cup and actually played a significant part in Emi Martinez. And not just Martinez, but obviously Messi finally winning a World Cup and sort of cementing his legacy, I think, as the GOAT, last time round. And that final against France, I rewatched the highlights the other day, and it's an unbelievable game. For Mbappe to score 3 times, the way the scoring went as well. Obviously you had Martinez's save at the end, but you saw people like Muani, John, featuring prominently. You wonder where he's gone. And yeah, it was just an incredible match. And then obviously went to penalties, couldn't get much more dramatic than that. And then, the greatest goalkeeper in the world stood up and delivered.
I mean, it ended up being an incredible match, but I remember when it was about 10 or 15 minutes left, or whenever it was before France scored their first goal, and I don't think it was an incredible match at the time. I was like, well, this is a really comfortable win for Argentina.
So it was 2-0 up to 70th minute.
Right.
So it was a dull. It looked like it was going to be a dull, boring game. So let me rephrase that. So up to the 70th minute, it was a very average game. Once France got one back, it ended up going crazy, that game, basically, because France scored almost straight away again afterwards. And then obviously 2-2, went to extra time. Obviously both teams scored again. So it looked like Messi had won it in, I think, 115th minute. And then France still equalised after that. Another penalty for handball. Mbappe, talk about pressure, having to score to keep your team in the World Cup. And then obviously had the chance for France as well to win it at the end. I mean, so the last 50 minutes, should we say, was unbelievable entertainment in terms of sort of the timings of how everything sort of played out.
So I was actually looking. Sorry, Matt. I was just looking at the stats for teams needing to win a penalty shootout, right? So the first penalty shootout was in 1982, and there's been 11 teams that have won the World Cup since then. So 5 of the 11 have had to win a penalty shootout. But Argentina last time, they're the first team ever that won 2 penalty shootouts on the way to winning the World Cup. So, I mean, I think that's it. If you're going to have a bet on the World Cup, don't get carried away with, thinking you know who's going to win, because there's a pretty good chance that they're going to have to at least get through a penalty shootout along the way, let alone everything else.
And we saw with Arsenal recently, there's a lot of luck involved with penalty shootouts. Not luck, but, you need nerves of steel, let's put it that way. Let's have a quick look towards this World Cup. Any particular thoughts, James, on this World Cup?
Wide open. I think it's wide open kind of thing. I just think with the heat and humidity, the extra game as well, it's over the best part of 6 weeks, isn't it, the World Cup as well? End of a long season as well, kind of thing. It's not starting till the 11th of June. Normally these World Cups start 1st of June or first week in June. It's going to be a long old tournament kind of thing. There's a lot of travelling as well. I just think it's completely wide open. I don't think there's an outstanding team into the World Cup. I mean, international football, we know there's not many chances you get to play proper international. You look at the qualifying in Europe, as John said earlier, that some of those games are utterly pointless kind of thing. It's not really proper football. So, yeah, I think it's very much wide open. I went through the teams earlier this morning kind of thing. And I look at Spain, they're favourites at the moment, aren't they? Slight favourites. They've obviously got Lamine Yamal, but he's coming off an injury. The groin injury. He's been out injured for the best part of a couple of months. Don't know where he is. You've got Nico Williams. You've got some good players in that Spanish squad, but they're not elite. They're not like Xavi Alonso, Xavi Iniesta. You've got Pedri and Gavin. How fit is Rodri, or how can he play 8 games in a row? France, how do you fit all their superstars into the team going forward? Dure, Barcola, Dembele, Mbappe, Cherki. But they've got some question marks at the back kind of thing, with who's their left back, Lucas Hernandez, right back. And then you've got Deschamps, I don't rate. England, reliance on Kane a lot. If he got injured or suspended, who's going to replace him? And my mind, biggest thing with England is, if no Elliot Anderson or Declan Rice aren't playing, you're down to Mainu, Jordan Henderson, who can't run, or Reece James. So I think they're a little bit lighter midfielding than definitely, especially if Rice or Eddie Anderson go down injured or whatever like that. It's just wide open. I'm going to have a small bet on Ecuador at 100, 120 to 1 kind of thing. They've got Pacho, they've got Hincapié, Moises Caicedo, if he can stay on the field to play because he gets booked every week. He got booked again last night in a friendly game they won. They don't score any goals. They're pretty ultra defensive, really, Ecuador. And they've got a 36-year-old striker, Valencia. I just think you don't have to win that many games to go through. Because you've got third and fourth playoff. You can get to a penalty shootout kind of thing. Not third and fourth, but third place team. Just think it's a wide open tournament, really do. But as John said, it's going to be a lot of dross in the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, because not only with all the extra matches and the extra kind of weak teams, but the fact that all the third place teams go through, not all of them, but a good chunk of the third place teams go through. So it probably does affect the strategy a little bit, right? It's just sort of more of a don't lose your opening game rather than try and get 3 points. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. The heat might be a factor in some games. I did a little article on home advantage, and I sort of feel like Mexico might have a good run. They've got one of the best home advantages in world football because they play at high altitude in Mexico City. Obviously, they're not going to be there for the whole time. I think from the quarterfinals onwards, it'll switch to the United States. But I think they still enjoy pretty good home advantage in the US because there's always a big Mexican population in each city, and I feel like they'll have a decent run. And I think everyone's got this mindset that an outsider is not going to win the World Cup because it hasn't really happened before. But there haven't been that many World Cups. That's the thing, right? There's only been about 20 of them. So it's one of those things that it hasn't happened until it happens, right? I mean, we've seen it in European Championships. There's been Denmark and Greece, so it's not like it's unheard of for outsiders to win. And so, I think that's sort of an angle, is that maybe the home advantage is a little bit underrated when it comes to Mexico.
I think Mexico's interesting because I was having a look that if they win their group and England win their group, England would meet Mexico in the last 16 potentially.
Be a tough game.
Because I was just looking at England's potential route, and it would be if they were to win the group, and the teams win their groups that you would expect them to win, it would be potentially, it'd be like a third place team in the last 32. The last 16 would be the winner of the Mexico, Korea, South Africa, Czech Republic group. Last 8 would be Brazil. I mean, that's one thing I would say. Brazil looks, they look so. I mean, this is the worst Brazil team we've ever seen, I think. And then potentially in semi-finals, you'd have Argentina, Portugal. So I think there's going to be a lot of luck in terms of which side of the draw you end up on. Which you need a little bit of luck in terms of. What you don't want is you don't want a really difficult last 16 game because you messed up your group essentially. So I think it's quite important that you actually win your group if you can. I think the one team I find interesting is Portugal. I look at you're trying to talk about sort of balanced squads. I look at that squad, and you got obviously likes of I don't think there's a better left back really in world football than like Mendes. They've got Cancelos, they've got Neves, Diaz, Vitinhas, Bruno's, Bernardo Silva's. They've got a lot of very, very good players, and they've got players that are actually suited to be playing. And if it is hot conditions, you want to keep ball. They will be very good at that sort of side of the game as well. And I think they also, we touched on Argentina doing everything that needed to win. Portugal are pretty similar to that. They'll cheat and all sorts their way to success if they need to.
I do think Brazil could be a little bit underrated, though. I mean, it's been a few World Cups now, right, where they don't necessarily have like a star-studded 11. But if you look at the last 2 World Cups, I think they've been really unlucky. 2018, they battered Belgium and lost 2-1. And then last time, I mean, they were really robbed against Croatia, right? They were 1-0 up. It'd been all Brazil, and then Croatia scored in the last minute of extra time and beat them on penalties. And I think we were robbed as well, because that would have been Brazil-Argentina semi-final, and what a game that would have been, you know. And instead, you end up with Argentina-Croatia, which Argentina won it easily. And I do think that since that shocking loss against Germany, that Brazil have actually come back and been pretty good at the last two World Cups. But it's a knockout, right? I mean, you just, the whole narrative just hinges on some team just losing a narrow game or losing on penalties. And so it kind of seems like, oh yeah, Brazil haven't really done anything the last few World Cups, but I think they've been close.
I mean, just looking at their squad, you know, they've got likes of Ryan, Rafinha, Neymar, although I don't know if Neymar's going to be fit for it. Cunha, Thiago, Martinelli, Endrick. So obviously you see a lot of Premier League players in there. Midfield, you've got Bruno, Newcastle, Casemiro, Paqueta, Fabinho. And
But I think this is what happens. Like back in the day, Brazil used to come over, and you hadn't seen the players really, right? So they all just sounded exotic and exciting. And now that they're playing for, you know, the likes of Brentford, and they just seem like a little bit more human. But one thing I've learned down the years is, I think if you start just looking at World Cup squads through the lens of like how good they are for their clubs, it doesn't really work out like that very often. You know, I think last time Brazil had Richarlison playing centre forward, and everyone was like, well, you know, he's a complete donkey. How are they gonna, how are they gonna win it? And they were pretty good. Like I said, they were unfortunate to get knocked out, and I would have fancied them against Argentina, I think, in the semi. I mean, it would have been a fantastic game.
And then if you look at Brazil, you know, they've got Marquinhos and Gabriel at the back, Alisson in goal, assuming he'll be fit enough. You know, so they do have some pretty big name players in there as well.
They've just lost their right back, Wesley, which is a big blow for them. He's out injured, the Roma right back. And Ancelotti, just don't know, never managed really international football. But international football is so different to club football, as we all know. They don't really get together that often, kind of thing. It's a different style of football as well. I suppose when we were growing up, when we knew about the world-class superstars of Brazil, you look at that through that team now and you go, not as good as it was. But maybe that's because we watch them every week, as you say, John, like kind of thing. We're used to seeing them all the time. And that was the mystique of the World Cups when we used to watch it back in the 86, 90, 94, 98. We didn't have the availability of all these players. We didn't watch them week in, week out on whatever streams, whatever TV channels. You kind of watch these players, the European Championships. We never really watched Copa Americas per se. Every 4 years, you'd see these superstars come through and you're like, wow, it's actually really good to watch. You never watch them regularly. Now you can watch them every time, twice a week, all year round kind of thing. So, but yeah, just don't know with Ancelotti, Brazil, one things. Another one would be, I know it sounds ridiculous, but Norway, only because of Haaland, and he can just bully really bad teams and really bad players kind of thing, and he could just score, do nothing the whole game. And you know what his record is like international football. It's ridiculous kind of thing. Just because he's so much bigger and stronger than other of these players. I don't know, Odegaard helping as well kind of thing. Norway might be one. They're probably pretty short now in the betting. Everyone's got looked at them, but it'll just be interesting to see how he goes.
I think they're a classic case of probably overrated, you know, because
Yeah.
I think we just touched on, you know, just looking at that Brazil squad. You know, Brazil may not have superstars, but the depth of squads, you know, relative to Norway's is just a different world.
Yeah.
It's always one of my favourite things in World Cups is when people are asked for their tips and they say, who's your dark horse? And they'll throw in a team that's like sixth in the betting or something. It's always the same thing. So I think, I don't know if Norway would be this year's version of that. I mean, they're not sixth in the betting, but certainly it's no secret that they've got a couple of decent players.
Right, before we wrap this up, any final thoughts on it? Apart from what the intention is from the pod is, you know, we're not going to do a podcast every day with regard to all the matches. We will try and do a pod every day after the day after England have steamrolling their way to glory, and have, you know, and obviously we'll catch up on the previous stories and matches that happened prior to that. But that's the intention at the moment in terms of what we'll be doing from a podcast point of view.
I'm going to find it really interesting. One thing is on this substitution rule that they're going to bring in, where a player has 10 seconds to get off the pitch at the nearest available point, and if you don't do it within 10 seconds, the substitution isn't allowed to take place. So the player will have to go off. Sorry, the sub isn't allowed to come on for a minute afterwards. So who's going to put a clock down? Is it going to be the referee, or is it a fourth official, or whoever it is? And what happens if you're in the centre circle? Like, sometimes it might not take more than 10 seconds to get off the pitch, kind of thing. But yeah, it's going to be a case.
Even you could jog off. Even you could jog off from the centre circle in 10 seconds to the side.
I mean, I don't mind the law in terms of, because you do see these ridiculous substitutions where they do it in injury time and then they take longer than 30 seconds and things like that. So, but there will be an instant during the World Cup where a player won't be able to come on for a minute because a player hasn't got off within 10 seconds.
They'll probably just tell the players to go down injured instead, right? And get stretchered off. I don't know how they could stop that.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about that. Yeah.
Get injured walking off the pitch.
Yeah. Put a hamstring walking off the pitch, yeah.
But seriously though, like, even if you don't get stretchered off, like if you go down saying, "Oh, I've got a calf injury" or whatever, and then you have to go off arm in arm with the physio. Like, they're not going to tell him to get off in 10 seconds, are they?
No, that's going to happen. That is the law, so there'll be fun and games for that. And then the water breaks as well, so it's going to be really weird, like having 22 minutes a game and then 3 or 4 minutes every half, kind of thing. The game's going to last over 2 hours. Every game is going to be over 2 hours. And then,
this is what the Americans have always wanted since they started getting involved in football. Turn it into 4 quarters instead, and then you can get more adverts in.
Sad times. All right, let's call it a day there. I think the next podcast I'll be doing with John, actually, and we'll be looking at US Open golf and some of our memories from that, and we'll hopefully have that out next weekend, or this weekend coming up, ahead of the US Open at Shinnecock. But thank you very much, gents, and we'll catch up soon.
Can I before we go, can I just drop in a little statistic for you from club football? So my nephew Stanley pointed out that if you look at the league table at the moment, Tottenham Hotspur are last alphabetically, and he said, "I've never seen that before." And I thought, yeah, it's kind of interesting. So I thought I'll look into it. And it has actually never happened before. This is the first time in history that Tottenham Hotspur are last alphabetically in the English top flight. Ironically, Arsenal have actually done it 9 times. How is that, you ask? Well, they used to be called Woolwich Arsenal back in the day, and there were 9 times when they were last alphabetically. But this is the first time no W's in the top flight.
Can we stop the season now? I'll take second place. Tottenham get relegated. I could even live with Arsenal doing a repeat. But no, interesting, John.
The only way is up.
I knew that there was the stat about the no W. It's the first time no W's in the league for a long, long time, because obviously Wolves and West Ham getting relegated. So, but okie dokie. Thank you very much, guys, and we'll catch up soon.
Yeah. Cheers, fellas.